Welcome, Dr. Sara Vogel. It's so great to have you back on Fempreneur Raw Talk. So proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here with you all. Well, with you, Aish, and then with anyone who's tuning in live or tunes in afterwards.
Dr. Sara Vogel is a playful, dynamic, trauma-informed sex educator, podcaster, Fulbright research chair. Pretty sure you were the first female, right? Indigenous woman to get that?
Or not the first, but one of very, very, very few Hawaiian women who has done this.
Thank you. And a TEDx speaker who is creating a world where conversations around sex and pleasure are normalized. She is also a two-time Academy graduate and a dear friend. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, of course, we're dying to know all about the TED Talk. Let's hear all about it.
I love that. Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me to talk about it. I think I want to go back to a couple years ago when I joined Launch Your Fempire, way back in the day when I just had a little dream, like this little dream of reclaiming my this little dream about reclaiming myself as a mother. Real quick before we go on, there's a little bit of feedback. It's not my side.
Okay, not sure.
I think we're good. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I really want to do is start when I at my story with Launch Your Fempire, because it was in the midst of postpartum depression. It was in the midst of trying to understand who I was now that I had become a mother in the midst of the pandemic, when I really wasn't all that satisfied with my 9-to-5 job. And so I thought about who I was and what got me going and who I wanted to be. And what I kept coming back to was someone who's a feminist, someone who wants to make this world better for women, for men, for people of all genders, who just sees the world as still struggling with trying to empower women and wanted to do something about it. And so when I got connected randomly to Launch Your Fempire, and also at around the same time entered a class to learn how to podcast, that was really the time when I realized that if I didn't see what I wanted in the world, I could use the venue of entrepreneurship to build the world that I wanted to see. Even just my little world with my community, with my social media presence. And that was so empowering to me. And it was so scary at first to use my voice. When I first recorded my very first intro to the podcast, I'm talking 2 minutes of what is this about and why does it matter? I recorded it probably 100 times. Okay, that's an exaggeration, probably 20 times, but still, I couldn't stand the sound of my voice. I didn't know, is this message perfect? Is it going to resonate with everyone? And what I found through the process of both building a business and building a podcast was really, you need to make it messy. You need to go through the motions, and you need to realize that this is part of the journey. Every time you make a podcast, every time you take a step towards your business, every time you take a step towards your goal, there is going to be mistakes along the way. But what's so beautiful about it is the learning that comes from it and the confidence that comes from it. And so I went from someone who had never had a podcast to someone who was getting at first tens of downloads and hundreds of downloads and thousands of downloads of people who wanted to hear these messages about normalizing conversations on sex and relationship and women's issues, even sometimes hard women's issues like sexual harassment, sexual violence, abortions, reproductive rights. And the more that I did it and the more that I leaned into my entrepreneurial spirit, the more confidence I had. The kids talk about being Delulu today. There's a sense of, I was a bit Delulu. I started reaching out to really famous people to get on my podcast, randomly got a couple of them who were like, sure, I'll come on. I was like, holy cow, that's amazing. And along the way, I thought, what would be a great addition to all of this is a TED Talk. Because I have so much content here now that I've built on social media, putting myself out there as a speaker through Launch Your Fempire, hosting community events through Launch Your Fempire, having a podcast with, 8,000 downloads. I was like, I can do this. And so I joined a group of people who that's what they do. It's a bunch of scholars, thought leaders, random community members, people with stories, a big idea that they want to share with the world. And when I thought about what I wanted to share, it was really about when I look in the area of sexual violence prevention, which was a big part of my career, my job, and a big part of my entrepreneurial work. We talk about sexual violence prevention in very deficit models, in very like, look at this harrowing experience that people have gone through. Look at these statistics of how many people are violated. And what we're not doing with our young people and our adults is creating space to talk about the joy and the pleasure and the beauty of having consensual love, not even loving, just consensual, healthy relationships. And so when I looked at how we had approached sexual violence prevention and consent education, I just saw like pleasure's missing. And I thought about my own story of learning about my agency to access my sexual pleasure. And I thought there's a story here. So when I joined the group, I started writing and writing and writing and editing and practicing and applying. And I applied to like maybe 15 different TED Talks. And finally one picked me up and they were like, all right, you're a finalist, let's go. I was like, oh my God, this is gonna happen. And I've been watching TED Talks for 10 years over that. I'll never forget my first one. It was Chimamanda Adichie's story, like the power of a single story, something to that effect. And I'll never forget the message that it had. And I thought, what an amazing venue to like go global and have your voice go global. So when it was all fun and games until it was about a month out, and they were like, okay, it's time to memorize this 13-minute speech. And I have ADHD. And I'm like, there's no way. Yeah, I know. We're Pisces ADHD sisters. Yeah. There's no way I'm going to memorize this speech. This is ridiculous. It's never going to happen. So then all this doubt, right? The thoughts of doubt crept into my mind. And so I practiced and I practiced and I would record myself and listen to it in the car and say it alongside to where my son in the backseat was like, Mommy, is that you on the radio? I was like, hell yeah, it's me on the radio. So I would practice and, you know, so sweet. I'll never forget this. He was like, Mommy, you're doing a really good job with your speech. He's 4, you know, and he was just like, I carried that with me even onto the stage. I finally fly to California and we're practicing for 2 days before that. They have like run throughs. They have a run through the day before, they have a run through that morning, and then it's showtime at noon. And that morning I got up at like 5 a.m. and I was like, I'm going to get dolled up. Like, I don't know how to do my own makeup. So I was like, I'm going to see a professional. She did my hair. She did my makeup. I got a dress the day before. I like didn't have anything. I like had to get a new bra, new underwear, new dress, new shoes. I was like decked out. Right. And it was like up to the wire. Like time was ticking. And I got onto the stage for my run through and they turned off all the house lights in this big auditorium. You know, at the day of, there was like over 300 people there. It went black and all I could see was the camera lights, the little like red recording lights. And I froze. And I was like, oh, I don't remember where I am. And Josh, who was in charge of it, was like, don't worry. You know, if you get lost, you just say, Josh, what's my line? He's like, you think every TED Talker like memorizes it perfectly? No, this is editing on the back end. He's like, there's
Thanks
no
for telling me now.
words. Yeah, I know. I was like, could have used that a month ago. Now I like curb some anxiety. I was like, okay. Still, I didn't want to be like shouting line every time, right? Every new paragraph. And I'm in the back, the green room, as I'm hearing all the people file in. And they have the first set of speakers. I was closing out the first half and then they had intermission second half. I'm in the green room with all these other incredible speakers, people from around the Bay Area of California who were just experts in their field. Everything from cooking and being a chef to working in speech pathology. Like it was amazing to be amongst this power. And I'm listening to each one of them. All right, calling up to the stage, this person, clap, clap, clap. They come back, they're like, oh, thank God that's done. The whole time I'm like, yeah, thank God it's done. I'm ready. But by the time I did there, I'd done all my power poses. I was like, let's get big. We got this. You got this. You know, you freaking got this. And it was like preparing for when I was an athlete and we'd go into games in college. I was like, Like, let's just go. Like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready. And I stepped onto the stage and I made sure I did not look at anyone's face. I was looking across the audience, but I did not lock eyes with anyone. I was like, I'm going to cry if I do that. I'm too emotional. And my family was in the audience. And it was a really touching story. They had never heard it before. And it was a story that opens with my experience with sexual coercion in college, in the college that I did this TEDx presentation at. And how disempowering that was. And then in the next, but it was my first relationship and I was in love. And I thought this is how it goes, right? This is how it goes for women. You just have to give it up, right? And then the second year in college, I went to my first pleasure party. The university had hosted it. It was, all about pleasure. It was introducing the idea that that's a part of consent and that's a part of a healthy sexual life. And you deserve it. Like everyone who's engaging in sex, like why wouldn't you try and achieve pleasure in some form or another? And so I told that story. So I'm out here like in public talking about my sexual assault, like dildos, which is not uncommon for me, but in front of like my 10-year-old niece and my mother-in-law and father-in-law, and they kind of know about me and what I do, but I think they're definitely like, whoa, well, this was a lot. But I completed the talk and there was laughter throughout it. I mean, I try to keep it light as much as possible. And I didn't cry. And I only called out for a line once. So that was good. And I improvised some, but mostly stuck to the script. They want you to like stick to your script. And when I got to the end and it's kind of the call to action, like what you can do, I just felt like everything in me was like all the people that I've worked with in the past, and then like my little self, was like all there with me, being like, you got this, right? And it was amazing that I didn't tear up like I'm doing now.
You're making me cry.
But I really hope that like parents, educators, policymakers can see this TED Talk, because the title is Pleasure and Power, why pleasure must be a part of consent education. And I tried really hard in the talk to call out to parents, right? Because like I can't necessarily change all policy and I can't change all education systems. But what I can do as one parent to another, as someone who unfortunately has experienced multiple types of sexual violence along the way, is connect with that person who most likely has as well, right? The amount of survivors who came up to me afterwards, including like a 16-year-old girl who had just told her mom like that she was sexually assaulted, and the mom was like, you're making this up, you're being dramatic, you just want attention. To that person, or all the older folks who are living with stories like that like there is space for us to change the narrative, right? And so my hope is that as the months and years go on, now that it's on YouTube, and I think we'll post it in the comments, that more and more families and people will see that and say, I can change the system that I'm a part of. I can talk to my education system and say, I want this type of education for my kids, or yes, I have the power to bring this to my child, because most likely they will have some kind of sexual life or relationship life that involves some kind of sexual activity. And the last thing I would want is for my child to either be a victim of sexual violence or to be a perpetrator of sexual violence, right? So once that was done and I got the amount of people coming up to me wanting to share their story, which usually happens when I say I'm a sex educator or I work in sexual violence prevention, people are like, let me tell you your story, which I feel very honored every time. My niece came up to me and she was like, wow, Auntie, like that was a really hard story for you to tell. I was, and I was like, oh God, Lily, like that made me, tear up. And I was just really proud to like have that opportunity to do that. And so I'd say to anyone who's listening, each one of you has a story. There was people on that stage that had the accolades, right? Like I have a doctorate and I am a Fulbright scholar and I'm the la la la, now I'm a TEDx speaker. But like at the end of the day, I'm just a human who lived this human experience that also connects with a lot of other humans' experience, right? So when you apply, you'll kind of pitch yourself. It's like, here's my big idea, and here's why I'm the person to talk about it. I want to encourage you that if you don't have a degree, if you don't have these like professional accolades, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you have something to say, I want you to say it. I want you to at least apply for it, right? I want to give you the permission to do that. Because there were people on there who definitely were just humans who lived through something really hard usually and told their survivor story or told what they learned through that experience. And that story will be really meaningful for someone. Every one of these will hit someone a little bit differently. So we need more stories out there. We need more women's stories out there. Yeah.
Well, thank you for
I know.
sharing with us, Sarah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
didn't
I
bring
feel
a
like
tissue.
you probably changed your niece's life right then and there. Like they probably changed the whole trajectory of her life hearing you talk. And I don't know one woman that doesn't have a story of assault or something that's happened that's made them feel uncomfortable. I mean, I went to massage school, right? Beyond that, I went to holistic healing school. I spent thousands of dollars on my degree, have probably over 3,000 hours of training, right? The last two massages I did were men, and they asked me for you know what. And it was like, I was like, that's it, I'm done. And that was just those are just two little stories of all the other things I've experienced, and I'm just one person. So I know I don't know not one woman who hasn't had that experience. And I'm also raising a boy in the world. And he got in trouble at school and he was saying to these girls, oh, you have juicy, sexy booties. And he lives
Yeah.
with a feminist mother who supports women. This is how pervasive the patriarchy is and the culture, because it's not like he's hearing that stuff in my home, right?
Yeah.
And I've also said to him hundreds of times, like, you're going to be a gentleman, right? You're going to treat women with respect. We've been talking about consent since, I don't know, maybe he was like 2 or 3, even
Yeah.
earlier, maybe, right? And still he was saying these things at school. And so it's just like what you're doing in the world is so important. It's so needed. There's such a gap still in this area. And then, yes, we deserve pleasure. We like, this is such a big topic that needs to be normalized, like you're saying, because I think so many of us grow up, especially if you're a little bit older, right? Like it still really wasn't okay to talk about sex or any of that stuff, much less enjoy it, right? That's why I feel like doing burlesque is kind of a rebellious act against the patriarchy, right? I'm like, I will do what I want with my own body. So
Absolutely. And
yeah,
it's very interesting when you become someone who finally is liberated in many ways. Like sometimes I still catch myself like falling into the trap that patriarchy is so hard to define, but essentially like putting you inside boxes where you're not free. You're not free to speak your mind. You're not free to move your body the way that you want to. You're not free to dress the way that you want. And definitely watching you and the other women who do burlesque is so beautiful. Like, what a beautiful expression of freedom and liberation, in a space of artistic exploration. And yeah, I mean, you can find sexual liberation through the movement of your body in the confines of your bedroom, listening to a song that you love and just moving your body, right? And I think that's something that as we move the feminist conversation forward, with regards to sexual violence prevention, is that we go beyond these policies, right? Like in higher education where I work, it's very much about here's the policy around consent. Well, it's hard to sell a policy to an 18-year-old student. They're like, okay, I won't like, it won't be me. I'm not going to experience that.
right.
When you sell sexual violence prevention in a more sexy way, because at the end of the day we're just talking about power dynamics and sex, right? When you approach it talking about consent in a way that resonates, where they're like, oh, this matters because, right? Talking about TEDx talks, if you haven't seen Simon Sinek's Why, How, What, you start with the why is this important to you when you're talking to your children? Why is it important for mommy, papa, auntie, uncle, whoever, to talk to you about sex. Why is sex going to be important in your life right now as maybe a young teenager and moving forward in your life, right? And at the end of the day, for me anyway, it's about self-expression, it's about authenticity, it's about being free in your body. And the way that, the way that you do one thing is the way that you generally do everything. And so when you are free in your ability to speak your mind, like on a podcast or on a live or whatever, that confidence in yourself and your confidence in your voice and your beliefs carries forward. For all the women here who have businesses, it's the same thing, right?
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
you have
What
to
I
be
love.
confident in
Yeah.
yourself and your message.
Well, this is what I love about you too, though. You're so fucking brave and courageous, and you don't let like things like, oh, maybe no one will respond to my podcast requests, right? Like stop you. You're like, no, I'm just gonna reach out to like person I want to talk to, and you got like two bigger people on your show, right? Like you're
Yes.
so willing to just go for it, because as we all know, we miss 100% of the shots we don't take. Right? I know that's a cliche thing to say, but it's just the truth. Like, how do you know that you're not somebody they'd want to talk to? Or, like you got on a TED talk, you said, I want to do it, and now you did it. Like,
Yeah.
I love the way you play with the universe and just are open to the possibility of like, why not? Like, why not me? And that's rare and special. And I think a lot of it probably is because you tapped into your pleasure, your confidence, all of that. And so you're not afraid to get out there and be like, hey, I'm just going to try it, right?
Well, I think a lot of pleasure starts first with playfulness and curiosity.
Yeah.
You know, I think it
Yeah.
bumps up against fear. I think a lot of people don't take the shots because they're fearful of what? What are you
Rejection,
fearful
someone
of?
saying no,
And so
validating
what
that they're not worthy, right? Like,
totally.
yeah.
And what would that rejection mean, right? And it's at some point you just have to be like, rejection's part of this game.
Yeah.
Like at this point, rejection. Okay, that's fine. Moving on, And I love this term and I go back to it often is rejection is redirection.
I was just going to say that.
I'm not like
Literally
a
just
super
going to say that.
spiritual person, but I
Yeah.
have seen patterns in my previous life, which I'm sure everyone tapping into this talk right now can look back and be like, when were the times that I didn't get the opportunity I thought I wanted? And because of that, I was able to pivot and build something else bigger, better, or more aligned. I'm sure many people can find multiple examples of that because that's what you do. You're a resilient ass bitch and you just do it, right? And the more you get rejected, the less it hurts. So, like, again, you just have to go through, you just have to like bust through the fear. And the only way to do that is putting yourself out there again and again and again and get a therapist. If it's like really messing with your mind, be like, I put out 10 pitches this week and like all of them were rejected. And your therapist will be like, how does it make you feel? But then they'll also be like, let's think about it this way. Get a coach, join the Launch Your Empire Academy. Like surround yourself with people who are going to remind you that one rejection, two rejection, 1,000 rejections does not determine your worth, does
I
not
mean,
determine your
just
value.
try dating in your 40s and then you'll really know.
Girl, I don't know that life, but I can only imagine.
Oh,
I
I
can only
don't wish it
imagine.
upon my worst enemy, but not that I have one of those, but yeah. Anyway, I
Yeah.
just love it. I love this conversation. I love what you're doing for the world. It's just so powerful, so needed. So, what is next for you, Doctor?
Well, I'm currently in Canada conducting curriculum development. So I'm developing curriculum for sex education. And so part of this is developing a curriculum for moms. So postpartum moms who want to get in touch with their bodies again, who want to build up their sense of self-confidence, that sexiness, build up just that aliveness feeling again, like so much of my journey in entrepreneurship and going this route is the deadness that I felt, which at the time I didn't know was like a deep postpartum depression. But I think it goes beyond that too. I think it went beyond that in the sense of I lost my whole identity of who I was as a mother. I had always been someone who strives as like a scholar, someone who strives in their work and really define themselves as their work and their productivity, which I've since learned is a very capitalist, like we grew up in a capitalist society. It's your worth in the world is not your productivity. Your worth is being here and energetically interacting with people, whether it be your family, your friends, your community. There's so much more than your productivity, right? We often equate purpose with productivity. And I think that people find purpose in their work. And I certainly do. I'm one of those folks. But I had to learn when that was taken away and I had an infant in front of me and my job was to care for this baby. I really had to wrestle with a lot of that inner child, like really wrestle with a lot of the feminist thought of like, but who am I now?
Yeah.
Without work,
Oh,
who am I?
I mean, I know exactly what you mean. It was like, wait, how do I do this? I can go to work, I can work my ass off. I like that's no problem. It's this creature in my hands. Like, what am I doing now? Who am I? Like, I completely lost all sense of self, was really lonely,
Mm-hmm.
depressed. I had an extenuating circumstance, of course, so things were really extra. But it
Yeah.
was one of the loneliest times of my life being a brand new mom and the scariest. And I miss those moments of just like this beautiful baby, but like I don't miss the darkness that was there, even though it was a time of joy also. The permeating kind of feeling for me when I think back is like this like heavy, dark, isolated place. And so I love that you want to focus on postpartum because it's such a, again, these huge conversations that we keep needing to have, because by
Yeah.
no means are women actually being really truly supported this way. And most women have experienced this feeling. And it's almost like there's something wrong with you if you're going through postpartum and, oh God, don't admit that you're fucking crying yourself to sleep if you're even sleeping, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many things going on there. But yeah, so that's really exciting that you're going to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, for those who are listening, if this sounds like something that you'd be interested in, definitely get on my mailing list. It's on drsaravogel.com. Definitely connect with me on Instagram,
We'll drop
at
all your
Dr. Sarah
stuff.
Vogel.
We're gonna drop all her stuff in
Cool.
the Facebook chat
Love
under
it.
this live. So and her TED Talk.
Yeah,
Watch the TED Talk, ladies.
please.
Support our girl. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
lots of big things for sure
Yeah.
are on its way.
Well, we're gonna be in touch with you always, and we'll be tracking with you and seeing all the things you're doing. Just keep doing the fucking amazing work you're doing in the world. And I'm hoping to have you back on my stage for Let's Get Visible, maybe if I can
Yes,
get you to
I would
come
love
on
that.
for a few minutes.
Always.
Oh
Always.
my God. I just want to tell you how proud I am of you and just like how remarkable it has been to watch your journey when you came to the academy to now. I mean, it's just like mind blowing. You're a great example of like being able to bend time and space to manifest what you really want. We've been talking about that a lot in the academy about frequency, and like if you have a clear vision, holding that vision and vibrating in such a way that you can actually time bend, right? You don't have to wait for what you want. You can have it as long as you go for it, right? And you're vibrating in that, following the joy, following the excitement. And I feel like that's something that you just do naturally. So, yeah. And you have a big
Yes,
mission
and yes,
there.
and I had to practice it
Yeah.
over and over. And that's the great thing about it is that these are not innate things that I was born with. It's a learned capacity. It's a learned skill. And so, yeah, I definitely feel like I bent time and space, like being on this Fulbright, being on the TEDx stage. I was like, was I ready for this? Shocker. No one's ready. No one's ready.
No one's ready for
Even
me.
no one's ready. That's a big surprise. No one's ready. So thank
I
you so
mean,
much,
and
Ace.
yeah, and all with a neurospicy brain too, right? Like none of this shit's easy. You're a mom, you were working full time, plus being in the academy, plus doing all these other things. So yeah,
Yeah.
you make it look easy, but I know that it was not. I know it was
Yeah.
not. It was probably good they didn't tell you could stop for the line because then you really had to practice and then you nailed it. So that's maybe a good thing.
It was good. I think they were very strategic in that.
Oh my
So,
God, babe. Well, it's always an honor to have you. I love you so much. Thank you for being here. And we
yeah.
will make sure to drop all those links so you ladies can check her out. Thank you. Thank you.
All
Thank you.
right.
Okay.